Hi and hello, watch fans, and welcome to another edition of the Real Time Show with me, your friendly neighborhood watchmaker, Rob Nuds. Today, I'm joined by Hamish Robertson, the founder of the Watch Collectors Club, known for establishing events in the UK and, of course, further afield as well, as we'll touch upon. Hamish, welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
So we don't have many event organizers on the Real Time Show, although we're friends with many behind the scenes. It's very interesting to talk to you and to find out more about your daily operations. But before we dive into the nuts and bolts of the Watch Collectors Club and your many activities in the industry, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you come from, how you find yourself working in the watchmaking industry, and what it is that you love so much about it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to. So I've always worn a watch. One of those kids who always had one on. My parents very kindly bought me a Tag Heuer Professional for my 18th birthday, and I wore it with pride. And in my mid-20s, I had a bit of spare income, and I thought about collecting. And I'd always had my heart set on a JLC Reverso. I have no idea how I found out about it or what I knew about it before then. And I started looking at vintage Jaeger-LeCoultre watches on eBay. And, as we all know on eBay, it doesn't take you very long to make that first bid. And I won a steel time-only JLC from the 1950s. It was delivered and I was delighted with it. And that was that. I fell down the collecting rabbit hole, as so many people do, and ended up with 6 vintage JLCs, Breitlings, Omegas, Rolex, all vintage, because that's where I saw the incredible value, which many people will agree with me still exists today if you're careful and you research what you're buying. Then I moved with work to London. So I was in a finance job and I moved to London for a new job. And in the office, someone said to me, "What's that?" pointing out one of these beautiful gold vintage watches on my wrist. And we got chatting, and that is the co-founder of the Watch Collectors Club, Ed Howkins. And we bonded over watches. And again, that's something many of your listeners will know and enjoy. He said to me, "Have you ever been to a watch meetup?" And I said, "No, what's a watch meetup?" He said, "It's where people who like watches get together and talk about their watches." I said, "Well, that sounds like something I'd love to try." So we went along to one in London and we had a good time. And then we went to a few brand events and we just started, again, my eyes just opened to the sheer extent of the watch world and just how much there was out there to learn about, to enjoy, to try on, to talk about. And the people behind the watches, everyone has a story about the watch they've chosen to wear that day, why they got it, what it means to them, what they like about it. And I really, really fell into enjoying all that. Now, fast forward a few years, and Ed and I decided that we wanted to try our own meetup. And we thought we could do things slightly differently. We thought that one of the big problems the industry has is it's quite exclusive. Now, that's fine because a lot of these products are luxury products, and exclusivity is all part of the brand. It's all part of the ownership experience. You'd like to own something that very few other people have. And I completely appreciate that. I have limited edition watches myself. I have luxury watches myself. I completely appreciate that part of the industry. But what it means is that when the industry puts on events, they don't actually ever invite very many people. And many, many watch enthusiasts have never even been to an industry event, even for their favorite brand, even at their local retailer or dealer. They just haven't had that chance. The other thing about watch meetups as well is historically, they've always been organized through the communities online, through internet forums, through Facebook groups, and they are also quite hard to access, surprisingly hard to access, given how many people there are who like watches. So we thought we could see if we could do meetups on a regular basis and make them more public. Now, what we didn't expect to happen was the COVID-19 pandemic. We started with 3 meetups at the end of 2019, and then the pandemic arrived and closed us all down. However, in 2021, after all the restrictions had ended and after we thought people would be confident getting back together, we held our first meetup in London in October 2021, and it was a great success. And since then, we've held over 150 events, mostly in London, but we've now branched out to other cities in the UK, Manchester and Glasgow. We hold meetups to show our own collections. We go to retailers, we go to brand events, we go to museums, and now we're doing these larger watch shows where we can bring even more brands and collectors together. and we started doing trips abroad. So I'll stop there because that's a very rapid intro.
It's a good intro, though. It's a nice top line. It gives me a lot to ask questions about. Let's dive into the nature of the shows. You said they're big shows. How many brands do you have showing at these events that you're organising nowadays?
So the next one that's coming up in November in Manchester, it'll be somewhere between 40 and 45 brands, which is really, really exciting. We just held one in Glasgow in May. We had 31 exhibitors there. So it's really a really huge number of brands want to exhibit at this type of show because they want to get close to their customers and find new enthusiasts to sell to.
Throw a few names out there for us. What kind of brands are we talking about? Brands people will have heard of, or are we talking more up and coming and fringe brands?
Yeah, whole range. So we're delighted for Manchester this year. We've got 4 premium exhibitors are going to be Christopher Ward, Bremont, Formex, and Baltic. So Baltic watches from France, Formex from Switzerland, and the other two, of course, 2 of the UK's biggest brands. We also have big UK brands like Studio Underdog and Mr. Jones watches. Omologato is a very big brand that people aren't too familiar with. And then, as you said, some of the smaller and up-and-coming brands that are still really just getting started out. We've got plenty of space for them. So quite a few of those will be coming along, whether it's Clements, based in Edinburgh. Many of your listeners might know Duckworth Prestex. They've been building a really solid following in the UK, and quite a few others as well.
Yeah, Neil's a legend amongst all mega watch fans, so they're well aware of his endeavours in the industry. And Clements is a brand that I like as well. I know that my friend Anna in Poland has been sporting a bright yellow one recently, and I'm quite jealous of it. In fact, I always find myself gravitating towards their watches because they are very joyful, and that's nice. And it sounds like you're creating a very joyful atmosphere. How many visitors do you tend to get at these bigger events with 30, 40 brands attending?
So we've been building up slowly. The last 2 shows, the first one in Manchester last year in November, we were completely shocked because we set the show up. We thought it was quite reasonable, nice show to start with. And we had 300 tickets to sell, and we sold out within 24 hours. So that was a huge, pleasant surprise, but also a bit of a disaster because we had so many disappointed people wanting a ticket after they'd sold out. Glasgow, we did really well. We had over 500 people through the door in May, which was fantastic for a first show in a new city. And we're delighted that this year's Manchester show, we have up to 1,000 tickets to sell. So we might not get there. We'll be delighted if we did manage to get that many sold, but we're really pleased to be able to offer that when the tickets go on sale in September.
So a lot of our listeners are going to be really interested in the specifics of your journey because you've started something here that is now your full-time job, correct?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So my first career was in finance. I did 14 years in that. It was a fascinating job, enjoyed large parts of it, but at the end I got fed up, had enough of it, had enough of the industry, had enough of the job, and wanted to find something new. And when I resigned from the finance job, I wasn't sure that the idea of building a watch community was possible as a business. So in those pandemic months when we were all sitting at home with little to do, I did a lot of research. I sort of thought hard about how I wanted to spend my time and decided to plunge all in. So, the way I see it, I'm spending all my time working out how to connect watch enthusiasts with other enthusiasts and watches that they love or watches that they don't know and want to explore. And to be honest, it's been absolutely amazing. The feedback we get from people when they come to our events, especially their first few events that they come to in London, and the shows and taking the shows to other parts of the UK that are unfortunately often ignored by the industry as a whole. It's just been fantastic to hear from people. And again, meeting different kinds of collector, hearing their stories, seeing all the amazing watches. It's just been fantastic.
So did you bring with you a fair bit of cash from your time in the finance sphere? I mean, obviously people are going to be wondering, hey, can I do something similar? Maybe not start a series of events and tread on your toes, but, build their own community or attack the industry from their own specific angle without having a lot of money behind them? Or have you really just dived in head first and learned how to swim on the go?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had some savings, but this is a business and it's always been intended to be a business. So we've always set it out that we're doing things professionally. I think I'm a big believer in keeping costs as low as possible. And that's an interesting conflict, actually. It's a conflict with the luxury industry, because many of your listeners will know that the luxury industry is often a very high spending industry, because very high spending on marketing really helps with brand building. And we haven't had the resources to do that. And we won't for a while. We have to think really carefully where we spend our money and how we do things. And I think I've enjoyed that constraint. It's a real challenge, and you have to do things carefully and you have to test things. But that's one of the things I was hoping to explore, like by starting my own business, to be honest. And I know you've done a similar thing many different times. And that's all part of the journey for me. So as well as learning what works for our community and what works for our club members and what works for the brands we work with, it's what works for me as building a business. And I think testing things carefully and building things up steadily is my preferred route. I've had some people say, look, you just need to go big. You need to go big and splash and make this huge splash. And I really appreciate how that works in business and how it works in luxury and fashion as well. But our approach has always been to be a bit more slow and steady. And it comes because at the core of this is a community. The Watch Collectors Club is a community of watch enthusiasts. And everything that we do is to help build that. So whether it's people coming along to our meetup in the pub next week in London, or whether it's people coming to Switzerland with us in September, or Dubai in November, or Watches and Wonders next year, it's so that people come and they know it's a really inclusive community that they can join. And they don't need to have watches XYZ. They don't need to have knowledge ABC. Anyone can come to our community because they're interested and excited about watches and they want to share that with other people. And I think having my business philosophy of growing carefully and using the cash that we do generate very carefully really, really speaks to that. So while we have a million ideas and there's a lot of things for 2026 that will be bigger and better and more exciting than 2025, to be able to do what we're doing already with pretty minimal resources is still really exciting. And as I said, it leads to a very, very healthy community where people are there because they care and because they're making friends and because they're really passionate about watches. And then similarly, what that means from the brand's perspective is we've worked really hard to find genuine enthusiasts who are ready to explore a new brand. They're ready to hear a new story. They're ready to talk in detail about the watches. And the feedback we get from brands, whether we're doing it at a retailer or an AD here in London or at our shows, is repeatedly people are saying, the community you've built are just amazing. It's amazing to talk to them about watches. We've had an amazing time. And yeah, that's how we're going to continue to do things.
Talk to me about the mechanisms of community building. You've got a very small marketing budget. You spend it wisely, sparingly. Where do you spend it? What do you spend it on? What would you like to spend a bit more on without going to the whole splash level? But without money in play at all, what do you do to build the community? Is it social media? Is it direct messages? Do you put out pictures? Do you send out newsletters? Tell us exactly how you've done it, because it's all well and good starting an event, but you need people to know that you exist before people come to the event. So you've done that very effectively. How did you do it?
Yes, our main communication tool is our newsletter and blog, which goes out every Friday, and we alternate between a blog post and our newsletter. We've built a lot through word of mouth, to be honest. And then we've done a very, very small amount of Facebook, Meta platform advertising, which has been really interesting in how that works. And I know a lot of brands experiment with it, and the bigger brands obviously have a lot more to spend, but ultimately it's all about trying things out. So we've been doing that. And it's also about going where other people aren't. So Manchester is an enormous city. It's in the north of England, and for your international listeners, the stat that's bandied about a lot is there's 20 million people within 2 hours travel of Manchester city centre, which I don't actually think is quite right. It's probably 20 million people within 3 hours travel of Manchester city centre, which is a lot of people. And very, very few watch events are ever held in Manchester. It's a small number of boutique events at most, and a few other meetups, and that's it. And so when we were coming to think about where should we do a show, I was just thinking, we've got to go to the north of England. I grew up on Merseyside near Liverpool in a town called Birkenhead. I wanted to go up to the northwest. Manchester was perfect. And the same with Glasgow. I worked in Glasgow for 8 years. It's an amazing city, fantastic people. really big city, 1 million people in Glasgow and its suburbs and hinterlands. And I just knew that there'd be a great number of watch enthusiasts. So trying to find and meet the enthusiasts where other people aren't is a key strategy for us. In London, obviously, it's a really competitive market, so it's been much more about word of mouth. It's about trying to put on a whole variety of events. So last autumn, we did a Swatch meetup. So just a regular meetup in the pub, but everyone should bring all their swatches along. This October, we're going to do a G-Shock meetup. And so we'll put a bit of promotion behind that and try and find some new people. And of course, the main goal there is to see the amazing and unusual watches they bring along. And we could all just talk about how much we enjoy swatches and how much we enjoy G-Shock. So the other aspect is trying to find new events that aren't being done. So we've got the next area to explore more in future is pre-owned. We've done some fantastic events with some of the top pre-owned dealers in London, like the Somlo family, Watch Collecting in Mayfair, and Fathom in the City of London, who's a relatively young business, Fathom, but doing extremely well. And when we do those events, we make them actually quite small. So we're looking at small groups of our members that, the public aren't invited. And then we can really get up close with these amazing vintage and pre-owned watches, which are very, very valuable. So the reason to make that event a bit smaller is so that nothing goes wrong, nothing gets dropped, nothing gets damaged. And we can really speak to the expert in the room, which is the dealer, or if we're doing it with an auction house like Fellows or Lion and Turnbull, who we've worked with, the same there is we can get up close with some very, very valuable watches. We can hear from the experts more about the watches, and that necessitates a more exclusive type of event, which is just for our club members. What we're hoping to do in future is some larger pre-owned events in terms of size, but equal as exclusive, because we really understand the value and rarity of these watches. So we're just going to work on finding different ways to host those events basically safely and securely. But we're hoping that brings along another set of different collectors and enthusiasts who maybe haven't thought about the club before, because they see us going to retailers, they see us doing these shows with new brands. So we look to do more with pre-owned in future. It's one of the many things we're looking to do more of next year.
So there's obviously a lot of diversity in the kind of events and partnerships that you're able to pursue. But what, in your opinion, are the main differences, could be advantages, could be disadvantages, that your kind of event offers the events organized by established industry players? We'll name no names, but we know some of the biggest events in the world. We know who organizes them. What are the main differences between what you're doing and what they've done in the past and continue to do today?
So we're really focusing on making things inclusive and accessible. And as I mentioned before, there is a contrast between the luxury part of this industry and the very most prestigious brands, the big high horology brands, the very, very large marketing budgets, and the things that they do, which often excludes not just your average enthusiast, but also their potential customers. So if you're only going to exhibit at a show at something like Watches and Wonders, and you spend a very large amount of money doing that, and it's a fantastic experience, which it is, and we've enjoyed it greatly, and we will enjoy going next year. If you are only going to do that, then you obviously aren't presenting your watches elsewhere. So what we're hoping to do is find other ways to help brands of every time present themselves to the right kind of collector and enthusiast in the right way. And that's what we're doing with our range of events. So whether it's an event with our members in London that we arrange in a boutique, and it's a very luxurious experience. We have the whole boutique experience. Our club members get to know the salespeople of the brand. They get to know the experts for the brand. That's fantastic. Or we're doing something with a micro brand who's just got started is able to affordably attend one of our shows because our exhibitor spaces are often more affordable than other shows. That's the other way we're trying to bring brands together with enthusiasts, because what we think is the largest number of people who can go to a watch show, a watch meetup, or watch event, the better. Because if you've been to one and you've enjoyed it, then you're more likely to go to another one. It sounds simple, but in an industry that's always been driven by the top and the most exclusive events, It's actually a bit of a different philosophy. So that's what we're really trying to do. Our shows, to make the economics of the shows work, we do have to charge for tickets. We've had feedback from people saying, why do I have to buy a ticket to a show where people are trying to sell me things? And I hear that, but we keep the tickets as affordable as possible, just £12 this year for our shows. And they really help make sure that the show can be in a great venue. They pay for the security, and they keep the prices low for the brands, which means that more brands can come along. So that's how we think about that. In terms of going to some of these other shows, I mentioned Watches and Wonders. It's the huge industry jamboree in Geneva. It's an absolutely crazy week to go there. And what we do is we help people go along. So we will be the, in effect, tour guide for the week. We'll have a whole itinerary of activities. We'll arrange meetings that you might not be able to arrange yourself, and you can come with us. And that's what we offer there. And that's what we're offering in Switzerland in September for Geneva Watch Days, and Dubai Watch Week in November in Dubai. And to be honest, that is just incredible fun for us. So we use our connections. We put together an amazing itinerary. We arrange collector dinners in the evening. And if you've always wanted to go, didn't have anyone to go with, weren't sure what you were doing, or worried about access, you can come along with us and we'll help you with all that. So we're trying to find ways, again, to just bring the watch brand, whether they're large or small, together with the right type of enthusiast and customer, and help them build their relationship directly. Like, the other thing I haven't said yet is we don't sell watches. We're not a watch club that's here to, every month try and design a new limited edition watch. We're here to bring people together to talk about watches, whatever they're into, and to help them explore, to find the new watch, to help them design a watch if they're thinking of starting their own brand. That's what we're all about.
Do you get the feeling that the brands really respect the effort that you're doing and the service that you're providing for them, bringing them customers? I'm sure that the smaller or mid-level brands definitely do, and they see that and they feel the benefit of it. But the bigger brands that you're visiting when you go out to Switzerland or to Dubai, for example, do they treat you well, or are they resistant to you contacting them? I mean, I don't know how well connected you are to all of the people that make the decisions in all of these big brands that you're working with, but it can sometimes be a bit of a closed shop. Have you had any pushback in that regard?
Yeah, I think over the last few years, that's been one of the biggest surprises, is how variable it is. And the different types of people in the industry that I talk to, like who gets it and who doesn't. And it has been a challenge. And some of the brands it's been a big challenge in would surprise you. Some it wouldn't, because those brands have their approach and everybody understands it, and that's fine. But some of the brands I would have thought would be welcoming have not been. However, on the plus side, the brands we've worked with who get it have really got it. They have understood what we're trying to do, why it matters to them, what's happening in the industry, and how difficult it is in industry marketing to break through. And so if you can work with collector communities, watch clubs around the world, then you have a really great chance of building these relationships as a brand with enthusiasts. And I won't name any names today, but that has been a huge difference. Yeah.
I guess the general assumption would be that the bigger a brand is, the more established it is, and certainly whether it's part of a group or not would have a huge effect on how receptive it was to welcoming people in to their facilities and showing them behind the scenes exactly what goes on in the upper echelons of watchmaking. Have you noticed there to be a trend that fits with that assumption? And are you noticing there are any brands that are changing, some maybe leading from the front and adopting a more modern mindset and a more open door policy?
Yes, things are changing. Absolutely. But it's the watch industry, which is a very conservative industry. So things are changing slowly. So everybody who ever gets involved with the industry, I think, I've talked to many different people in many different roles, when they come into the industry, just like me, they're surprised at how variable it is. And they're also quite surprised at how conservative the industry can be. And in a lot of ways, that's absolutely fine. Like, this is a very successful industry. So its conservatism has done it well over the years. It has a lot of good points. And, if you get into sort of business strategy discussions, especially about certain brands and companies in the industry, you can sort of understand why they will remain conservative. And that's absolutely okay. But I am pleased to report that many brands, big and small, and I don't and including brands owned by large luxury groups, for sure. Including those brands, they are looking to be more collector and enthusiast focused, build those relationships, deepen those relationships, and not just leave it to ADs and retailers to have a champagne reception twice a year. They are moving past that, and they are looking for a lot of ways to get closer to their customer. There's a lot of things going on that I hear about will be very positive when they finally come to fruition. And then the contrast, of course, and many of your listeners will understand this perfectly, is the young brands who've been set up in the last 20 or 10 years and have reached a fair degree of success. Then, of course, they are very, very open. They often have a value of transparency. They want to communicate very clearly to their customers and potential customers what they're doing, how they're doing it, welcoming people in. I mean, this September, we're going to Biel as well as Geneva. And it's a slightly odd place to go first, instead of Neuchâtel. The reason we're going is because I'm desperate to go to the Omega and the Swatch museums. And so since I'm the organizer, I get to choose. But while we're there, we can go to Harage, we can go to Formex, we can go to Armin Strom, and we can go to Christopher Ward. And so what I'm looking forward to is by going to the facilities of those businesses for quite different brands. If you don't know them, they are all completely different. But we're going to learn a huge amount from 4 brands that have a very open mentality. And that's also what's really exciting about the industry now is, don't get me wrong, next year, if I can go to the Jaeger-LeCoultre manufacturer or the Zenith manufacturer or the Breitling manufacturer and do their tours, I will be absolutely delighted, and we'll facilitate that for club members, and I'll look forward to it. But this year, just because the way things have worked out, I wanted to go to Biel. We're going to go and visit 4 completely different watch brands that are all very open with what they do and how they do it, and we're really looking forward to that. So it's, in a conservative industry, what I've learned is there's so many interesting opportunities out there to go and make the most of the ones that are available, to push on the open doors and work with the brands that really get it. And over time, more brands are moving this way. So everybody will continue to benefit. If you think your favorite brand is difficult to access and you're wondering why they don't do some of the things you see other brands doing, they will get there in time. I'm pretty sure of that.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds to me like you think an increase in transparency is a good thing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I think that's what we've seen in the industry. So the explosion of micro brands in the last 20 years is because of the increase in knowledge and the increase of information flow. So people are much more willing to consider a new brand that someone's just launched and they've just heard their story, or a brand that's on their second or only on their second or third watch, because the brand is telling them, this is the quality of steel I'm using, this is the movement, this is what I considered about the movement choice, this is what I've put into getting the design right, here's the story, here are the influences. And when collectors, potential buyers, potential customers can see all that easily online, it's absolutely right that they should then go back to some of the bigger brands or older brands and say, well, tell me more about what's going on here. And many of these big brands have done very well. They've massively increased the details, the levels of detail given out about their watches. They are very clear on, if you look at the websites, watch websites usually aren't that great, but some brands have really done a great job, in highlighting their movement history, their movement architecture, what the different movements are in different ranges. And that's all come because new brands have pushed that transparency. So the older brands, more established brands, have had to catch up.
Do you think that older brands catching on could be said to be a majority movement, or still a minority, perhaps even extreme minority response to the micro brands being so open with their operation? I'm asking because I feel that with the higher end of horology still, this increase of transparency at the entry level is, in a strange way, almost forcing them to be more protective. And that's creating quite some separation, not just between the two ends of the market, but between the demographics to which those ends of the market might appeal. What's your perception of it? Do you think that it's inevitable that eventually, for example, Patek Philippe will show us component prices like Code 41 does? Or do you think there will always remain a cloak over that corner of the industry?
Right, look, I don't think full transparency is necessary at all. I think it's really important that brands can do what they do based on their own expertise. So, I'll give an example you just used, right? So, I'm not a watchmaker; I don't have any technical training. And Patek Philippe often boast about the new patents in their new movement, which is great for them because they're developing innovative technology that's patentable and hopefully is improving the movement, whatever they're trying to do with it. But they don't need to tell me what the component cost is or how they make the components. But it'd be really interesting to tell me a bit more about what the patent is for and why it's a progression. And so in that one example, Patek Philippe, I would argue, never need to go into the details of component supply chain and details. But if they gave people more information about their innovation and their skill at moving on the science of watchmaking, moving on the engineering, then I think they benefit. But at the moment, they don't. And that's a great example of how if you go and see an independent watchmaker, so one of the things you can do in Geneva during Watches and Wonders Week is go to a show put on by the AHCI, which I won't attempt to pronounce the French, but it's basically an association of independent high-end watchmakers who mostly make their watches by hand, almost entirely in some cases, including all the components. And they put on an exhibition and the watchmakers attend. And so you can go and see these fantastic timepieces and you can ask any level of detail of questions to these watchmakers if you so wish. And they will very happily tell you because that's what they're most interested in as well. They're most interested in these incredibly technical discussions about why they chose to do what they did in their extremely small production run watch. And one of the group we went with in April was a watchmaker, and he was genuinely giddy. He's a watchmaker in London. He services Rolexes and all sorts of things. That's his full-time job. He loves watchmaking, and to go and meet these people and hear about their thoughts about why they did what they did was fantastic. And the likes of those people being in the industry who always have, there's always been watchmakers set themselves up in Switzerland and make a watch under their own name and sell it to a discerning collector or enthusiast. They are also putting more pressure on some of the larger brands to be a bit clearer on what they're doing and why. And I think that Patek example is a good one. Patek could give out more information, but they don't have to give out any secrets. They don't have to change the mystery or the exclusivity of the brand. They don't have to do any of that, but they could help people understand more about all the work that they're doing for sure. And I actually think the recent Rolex movement in the Land Dweller, which has a brand new escapement, Rolex have done that. They've put out a lot of PR and press about what's new in the movement, so that the enthusiasts who like Rolex for their reliable and high quality movements can really appreciate that. So we are seeing more of it. It is a trend that will continue. But as I said, at the moment, in terms of just sheer openness, and again, you'll know this, the younger brands are more open, but that's okay. It's okay for there to be big differences.
I want to sort of stick on this topic for a while because I think it's quite interesting. We might have stumbled into a conversation that people don't have very often, and we should explore it to see if it's of any interest. Maybe it comes down a little bit to the definition of transparency, or maybe not the definition of it, but what we expect from its application to brand communication. Generally, I think what people mean by it is that you reveal facts and data and statistics to justify the existence of a product. I think that's what people generally mean. There's a lot of things that go into watchmaking, especially at the upper end of this industry, that are extremely hard to quantify.
Yeah.
The artistry, the experience. If you say to me, oh, every single component in this watch is hand finished, it's difficult for people to put a dollar value on that. If somebody says to me, this watch was designed by Gerald Genta, now let's take something like, let's take the Royal Oak for an example, scribbled on the back of a napkin in a few minutes, probably. Now, a less experienced person in the field of design would say that job took Genta 5 minutes. And therefore, whatever his hourly rate is, that's worth 1/12 of it. to the consumer. But of course, the truth of the matter is that 5 minutes is the culmination of a lifetime of experience and of a genius that can't be bought or taught. So there's value, extremely esoteric value in a lot of elements of upper end watchmaking, that even transparency in the sense of pulling back the curtain and saying, oh, this is what people do, and showing the consumer people doing that cannot truly express the value thereof. So I wonder sometimes whether this push to transparency in the entry level is a bit of a dangerous thing, because what it does, because the very majority of entry level brands are far easier to categorize as products than their horlogerie counterparts. Those pieces up at the top end, they're like works of art in comparison to like a great solid watch from Duckworth Prestex or Clements or you name it, any of the brands that we're talking about. We have a load of them on the show because they're an essential part of the watchmaking ecosystem. They're very, very different things. You know, you can't take the transparency strategy of Code 41 or Christopher Ward and apply it to Patek, because it would commodify a work of art, a jewel in horology's crown. So do you feel that it's possible that, as I alluded to before, the demography of watch buyers is splitting and moving far apart? I think for maybe the first time in history, because when you say the first time in history, okay, it's fair enough for people sort of roll their eyes and go, oh, what a hyperbolic statement, you know, what a ridiculous exaggeration. But watch collecting has really only existed, let's say, since 1983, since the foundation of Swatch. You know, prior to that, watches were tools for the most part. The quartz crisis came, nearly destroyed the whole concept of mechanical watchmaking. Swatch came along, gave us this idea that we could have more than one watch and it would be fun to have more than one watch. So really, throughout our lifetimes, this hobby has been in its nascence. And we get to this point now where it starts to feel a bit more mature, and we've got history to point to. We've got phases of existence in the luxury watch collecting industry that we can reference. And we're now in this point where like everybody seems very happy to jump onto the bandwagon of transparency and go, yeah, well, this is obviously the good future. This is the best route the industry can take. But I do wonder sometimes, and maybe it's because I'm very close to it and because I am a watchmaker and because I've been at the bench and I have these things in my hand, and I think, is it possible to really communicate like the excellence of these pieces to everybody that would be reading the words a brand could write? And words are often an insufficient substitute for those years and years of experience and for the brass under the skin on one's fingers. You know, it's a question that floats around my mind more often than I'd like it to be honest. But what do you think of that? Do you think that transparency can be dangerous? And do you think that it somehow could undermine some of the skills that we value the most?
You've said a lot there, so I'll address it in a few different ways.
Yeah, sorry, it's quite a lot. I just absolutely went on a mission there, but let's stick with that. Let's stick with that specific point. Like, can transparency be dangerous, or the expectation of transparency be dangerous for brands that are doing something that isn't so easy to explain?
What I've found is that collectors and enthusiasts, even if they're just starting out, are much more open-minded than I think people fear. So another example of transparency that is absolutely perfect is when Langer & Söhne, the German brand, very, very, very fine watchmaking, very small production number for their popularity, and an amazingly complicated set of watches in their catalogue. They brought their head watchmaker, who was their head assembly watchmaker, to a show they did at a car show outside of London in September. I don't know if they're there again this year, but they were a couple of years ago when I went. And we were chatting to him, and I said, well, for your high complication, your most complicated watches, how long does it take you to assemble it the first time? Right? So when it's been through design, it's been through prototyping. And the answer was 4 weeks. This is not the finishing of the watch. This is the making sure it goes together and works, is a 4-week process the first time they do it, right? That kind of transparency does not take anything away from what that brand is doing. I would argue that it adds to that, to what the brand is doing. And so this is where, when brands are able to do more events where people can talk to their staff, they can have an insight into the design, they can have an insight into the process that goes into making these watches, they can have an insight into finishing. I don't think it takes away any of the mystery at all. I think it helps add to the sheer quality that people want to appreciate when they're thinking about buying high horology or very fine finished watchmaking. The other aspect I'd come to about the modern day enthusiast is to this point about information being much more freely available and people being able to build confidence, people being able to go to very high quality pre-owned watch dealers versus in the past when it might have been felt much more risky to buy something pre-owned or from a dealer you weren't sure of. It's now possible to go to dealers with multi-decade reputations, such as we have here in London and there's others around the world, to purchase platforms that have authentication, that have every watch goes through their hands and such like. And I bring that up because I'll use my favorite brand, Jaeger-LeCoultre. If I'm admiring a new watch of theirs, one of their super complicated gyro tourbillons, or a minute repeater, one of their most complicated, most expensive watches that will almost certainly never end up in my collection due to their value, I can learn a bit more about what they're doing. I can talk to them about their craftspeople, their history of watchmaking. And the fact that their heritage of making incredible watch movements is so strong. It is their name is the nickname is the watchmaker's watchmaker, because for many decades of the 20th century, they made movements that everybody else used, and they were incredibly good movements, and they've continued that heritage today with their range. Now, I can go and buy a vintage or a 70-year-old Jaeger-LeCoultre watch, and it might just be a time only. They're very, very affordable because they made plenty of them. And they come in all different styles, and you can buy them for under £1,000, right? So you can buy this amazing Swiss brand for under £1,000 if you're prepared to buy pre-owned. And sure, it's not waterproof and all the rest of it, but you get a time-only movement or automatic or manual or whatever, and it's a very, very high-quality mid-century movement made by the company that was pretty much making top 3 in the world in terms of quality. And that enhances my appreciation of my watch when I own it, my knowledge, and also enhances my appreciation of the fact that they're still going 70 years later, they're still committed to the same things. And I think even if they introduce a bit more transparency, and we had a great event with JLC in their London boutique, and we talked about the factory and how it's set up and how many different crafts, I can't remember the number now, but there's 140 or 160 different specific skilled trades in that facility, which is just crazy. That's not including, the accountants and the cleaners. That's just specific people with watch assembly or decoration trades in their facility. And I love that aspect of transparency. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help people appreciate more of that, explore more of that. And absolutely, to your point, when we're talking about new brands, help them understand how to explore the value and the product from a new brand. But also what we're trying to do is that for the oldest, most prestigious, and indeed the high horology brands. So one of the things we can do is if we do a small group meeting with a very high horology product, or we go to one of these more high-end boutiques in London and there's just a group of club members, we make it very easy for people to enter that discussion and enter those details, and we make sure that everybody knows what's going on and what's being talked about. Not because we're experts, we're not experts. Again, technically speaking, I know very little compared to many, but we can help people ask the right question, we can help people understand the answers, and we could all enjoy learning and exploring more about the industry together. We have a club member who, before he came to the club, before he found us, he just bought a vintage time-only Patek from the 1970s as his pride and joy. And he'd done all his own research, and he'd worked out a channel to buy it from that made him very confident it was a safe purchase, and he was delighted with it. And so he was able to access the brand and the amazing brand heritage that Patek Philippe has with something that he could afford, and it's a fantastic timepiece. And I think that's what's really important. And I don't think transparency into what brands are doing today takes anything away from that if it's done well and it's done with collectors and enthusiasts in mind, which, as I said earlier, the trend is towards that. It's just quite a slow trend in some cases.
What do you think about transparency when it comes to pricing? Because, say, Christopher Ward is maybe the very best at pulling back the curtain on this front. Code 41 is also excellent because they really do break down their component prices In fact, maybe Code 41 takes the crown there because they tell you basically exactly how much they're making from every watch. Do you think that that can warp the expectation of what a product should cost in a way that prevents ambitious design? And Code 41's relatively ambitious in comparison to Christopher Ward. Christopher Ward is changing, of course, because it has recently really pushed the boat out with its own movements and its in-house developments, and they are, to be applauded for those advancements, I would say. But I work with some brands that are really design-led, and design is not something it's easy to quantify either, not just because of the time someone's spent training as a designer or the experience they've had, which obviously accrues to the point at which they're able to come up with something that is truly new or at least interesting for watch lovers. But you can't really put a dollar value on that either. And as you go up the food chain, there's inevitably going to be higher and higher margins. It is not consistent. Obviously, there's a luxury tax that we always say, when you buy something like an HYT, despite the incredible technology that's within it, there's more than a 3 times markup on that. There's probably more than a 6 or a 7, 8 times markup on that because of the exclusivity of the technology. When you read comment sections, I don't know if you do this, and if you don't start because it's quite depressing. But if you read comment sections on major media platforms, you'll see people saying, this would be great, like it's got a Salita movement in it, for example. This would be great for $500, or this would be great for $1,000. And it's like, yeah, okay, good stuff would be great if it were cheaper. I appreciate that, but do you think that line of criticism is increasing now because of the transparency in the lower end? And is that a bad thing for watchmaking because it maybe would put a cap on the willingness to be wildly creative and to spend those days, weeks, months, years in research and development? Or is it just a positive thing because it will force brands to be more lean and efficient in their design process?
I don't think it's an issue. I don't hear it from my community that price is the issue, that those people who make comments about price think it is. I don't think they're in any way a large percentage of the community or the potential customers. When I meet people who are brand new to getting into watches, which you meet more of at shows, and they are, like, in some cases, just shaking with excitement at their first chance to see the watches in person, even when those watches are very affordable. And that's before you have the utter joy, which I have done in taking someone to the Breguet boutique for the first time, that they've never seen what a Breguet represents. And I don't think the majority of people who are, your casual person in the street, the price may be the first thing they look at, absolutely. But in my experience, the increase in transparency is not causing a lot of people to get more upset about prices. Now, the price increases we've seen over the last 5 years because of the high levels of inflation, because of the supply chain disruptions due to COVID, all these different things, the price of gold going up so much now and seeing the increase in prices we've seen in some gold models this year. Those things are talked about a lot, but they're not, in my experience so far, being talked about in a way that is making people say, oh, I'm not interested. They're still really interested, and they still really want to make that purchase of their favorite brand or the brand they've never purchased from before at any level. They just want to make sure they make the right purchase. And I'm the same. Obviously I have a limited budget to buy watches every year. I sell some from my collection to buy new ones. I'm not out of the ordinary in any way, and I think very carefully about the purchase. But when a brand is saying, this is the price we're charging, and this is our story, and this is our heritage, and this is what we think it's worth, then I'm not standing around complaining that a great watch should be £1,000 cheaper because of the movement that's in it. I'm saying, okay, well, I like it enough to pay the price, or I don't. And I think that's the majority of people. And I think it gets a lot of comments, and a lot of those commenters, I just haven't met them in person and heard their complaint, because I would always just point them to another watch. The industry is enormous. So if you're shopping at this budget, like, spend all your energy finding the best watch for you at that budget, rather than complaining a watch that's 3 times the price should be cheaper.
Very good. That makes me feel a lot better. So we went down an interesting path there. Very much enjoyed that conversation, hearing your thoughts on the subject. But let's circle back to the events again, because this is obviously your speciality. I want to talk about ticket prices, which you mentioned before, because there are multiple ways to structure an event, of course. Sometimes the events can be free to the visitors and the burden of cost falls to the brands. Sometimes the brands sell on site, sometimes they don't. And obviously, it would be possible, theoretically, for an organizer to open the doors to the public without charging for tickets and either increase the charge to the brand directly or perhaps even take a percentage of the watches sold on site, which is not a model I've really ever heard anyone pursuing, maybe for some obvious reasons that it would disincentivize a brand to sell on site to save cash. But have you heard you've heard some questions? Obviously, you mentioned it before about people saying, oh, why do I have to buy a ticket when brands are selling me watches? I would imagine there's not too much pushback there, and there's multiple advantages to selling tickets, as in it kind of qualifies the audience a little bit. You know that you've got people who are serious about coming to this event, walking through the doors. But have you considered alternate models? Have brands themselves offered any feedback on that front? And what about the price of tickets? Is that something that you're comfortable with, or does it need to go up in the future?
Yeah, I mean, we've considered it all the different ways you could do it. The simplest reason we sell tickets is because if it was free registration only, over a third and probably more, like nearly a half people who registered wouldn't show up. So as an event organizer for something big, where you've got to provide security, you've got to provide all of the things you need to do it responsibly and very well, you really need to know who's coming. And that is the straightforward reason to sell tickets. And it's the same, basically, when we do our events in London that we don't sell tickets for. You can just come along, you can see if you like the club before we ask you to join up as a member. We have about the same rate of people who register and don't show up. So that's kind of a rule of thumb, is at least a third of people. So again, for anyone looking to organize an event, if a third of the people who've said they'll come don't come, that's not on you. That's the norm. I think in terms of pricing and the balance between charging exhibitors, charging attendees, I think, our pricing, we think, is very, very reasonable. We think most attendees come for a couple of hours at least. We have enough brands for people to see that it's easily a couple of hours of fun chatting about watches, go for a drink, come back, meet some more brands. If a brand's busy, wait and go back later. And we see people staying for a lot longer than that at our shows. So as a day out, having a very, very accessible price, we think is very fair. Will it go up in future? I mean, it depends where costs go. So it's quite likely, we know the world we live in, costs seem to go up all the time for no obvious reason. So we'll see how it goes. But for now, this year's 2 shows, we're very happy with a £12 price point. I think, to speak to the biggest show in the world, Watches and Wonders, which is £70 a day in Switzerland, I would say that's also completely worth it. It's 100. You get a bit off if you buy 2 or 3 days. So there's a bit of a bundling discount there for their show next April for the public days. In terms of what you get on the day, it's an amazing experience. It's the luxury part of the industry showing itself off in the best way it can, with amazing stands, beautiful presentations. There's a lecture program. You can book meetings with the brands to get hands-on with the timepieces. All that. It's an absolutely amazing experience. And so you might think, blimey, £70 seems a lot for a day because I've got to travel there and everything. But I actually think it's completely worth it. And so I think it'll continue. I know that in the States, the model isn't to charge people for entry. So I haven't spoken to any of their show organizers about how they manage that and what I just discussed in terms of managing for capacity. But yeah, I think the model works very well for us, and I expect it to continue here in the UK.
Very good. Well, I guess we have to wrap it up there. We've been chatting for almost an hour, and it's been a very expansive conversation, one I've very much enjoyed, and I'm looking forward to getting you back on the show again to talk about the further developments of the Watch Collectors Club. Just before we sign off, could you just remind everybody when and where they can attend one of your events and what it's going to cost, how they get themselves a ticket?
Yeah, absolutely. So our club events run in London almost every week. Certain times of the year, it's multiple events a week. We run meetups and events in Manchester as well. Our show in the second half of the year is Saturday, November the 8th in Manchester in the city centre. Next year, we'll be running a show in Glasgow in May, Manchester in November, and hopefully one other show in the UK. We're travelling to Switzerland this September, Dubai Watch Week this November, and a whole week for Watches and Wonders in April next year. And we just encourage you to come along, reach out to the community, check out what we're doing. We do online events as well. If you can't make it to where we are in the UK, you can join us for our online events. And just get in touch if you're interested, because we'd love to meet you and hear your story, hear what you're into.
I hope that the community picks up on that opportunity and comes along to see you at one of your locations. So if you'd like to get in touch with us, you can obviously contact us via the usual channels, either our official Instagram handle at therealtime.show, via our email accounts, either Rob, Alon, or David at therealtime.show. You can contact Scarlett via her Instagram. That's at Scarlintheshire, SCARLINTHESHIRE. And you can get in touch via the contact form on the official website, www.therealtime.show. Please like, subscribe, and follow. We'll be back soon with more top quality watch content with the industry's finest. Until then, stay safe and keep on ticking.